Overthinking is often mistaken for intelligence, as if constantly analyzing, worrying, and replaying events means we are being careful or responsible. Buddhism challenges this idea gently but clearly. It teaches that overthinking is not wisdom. It is a form of suffering created by the mind's refusal to rest. When the mind keeps circling the same thoughts, it is not solving problems, it is clinging to them. This clinging creates tension, anxiety, and exhaustion, even when nothing is physically wrong in the present moment. From a Buddhist perspective, suffering does not always come from external pain. Much of it is self-generated through mental activity. Overthinking is the mind's attempt to gain control over uncertainty, but the more it tries, the more restless it becomes. Each thought gives rise to another, forming an endless loop that pulls us away from the present. Instead of clarity, we experience confusion. Instead of peace, we feel pressure. Buddhism does not judge this habit. It simply points out that the mind has been conditioned to overthink through fear, desire, and attachment. When we begin to see overthinking as suffering rather than strength, compassion naturally arises. We stop fighting ourselves and start understanding the mind with patience. In that understanding, the need to overthink slowly begins to dissolve. In Buddhism, the restless mind is not an enemy, but a deeply conditioned habit formed through constant wanting, fearing, and comparing. The mind moves from thought to thought because it has learned to seek safety in mental activity. It clings to memories, plans, and imagined outcomes, believing that thinking more will somehow protect us from pain. This clinging is subtle. We often do not notice it happening, yet it quietly shapes our inner world. The Buddha taught that the mind naturally attaches itself to thoughts, just as the hand grasps objects. Once a thought appears, the mind holds on to it, adds emotion to it, and builds a story around it. A simple concern becomes worry. A small regret becomes self-judgment. The restless mind does not know how to let things pass, so it keeps collecting thoughts, carrying them long after they are useful. This constant movement creates inner noise. We feel mentally busy even when our body is still. Buddhism explains that restlessness comes from mistaking thoughts for reality. When we believe every thought deserves attention, the mind never finds peace. Through awareness, we begin to see how clinging fuels restlessness. As we notice thoughts without holding them, the mind slowly learns that it does not need to chase every idea. In letting go, natural calm begins to return. Buddhism makes a clear distinction between awareness and identification with thoughts, and this distinction is central to understanding overthinking. Awareness is the quiet presence that notices thoughts as they arise. Identification happens when we believe those thoughts are who we are. When a thought appears and we say, "This is me, this is my truth," suffering begins. Overthinking thrives in this identification because the mind feels personally threatened by every idea it produces. The Buddha taught that thoughts are not the self. They are temporary mental events, conditioned by past experiences, emotions, and habits. Yet most of us live as if every thought defines us. A fearful thought becomes fear. A critical thought becomes self-hate. Awareness, on the other hand, simply observes. It does not argue with the thought or follow it. It sees the thought come and go without attachment. When awareness is present, overthinking loses its power. The thought may still appear, but it no longer pulls us into endless mental loops. Buddhism does not ask us to stop thinking. It invites us to change our relationship with thinking. As awareness grows, space opens between the observer and the thought. In that space, we discover that peace is not something we create. It is what remains when we stop identifying with every thought that passes through the mind. One of the most comforting teachings in Buddhism is the understanding that thoughts and emotions are impermanent. They arise due to certain conditions. and fade when those conditions change. Overthinking feels overwhelming because we assume that what we are experiencing will last forever. The mind convinces us that a painful thought or emotion is permanent, when in reality it is constantly changing, moment by moment. The Buddha taught impermanence as a reminder that nothing in the mind stays fixed. A thought that feels heavy now can feel distant an hour later. An emotion that seems unbearable eventually softens. Overthinking happens when we resist this natural flow and try to hold on to or push away what is already temporary. By clinging to thoughts, we unintentionally give them more strength and duration. When we begin to observe thoughts with the understanding of impermanence, a gentle shift occurs. Instead of panicking, we wait. Instead of reacting, we allow. We realize that we do not need to solve or escape every thought because it will pass on its own. This insight brings deep relief. It teaches patience with the mind and trust in change. Knowing that thoughts are temporary allows us to meet them with calmness. And in that calmness, overthinking slowly loses its grip. Buddhism teaches that inner peace is not achieved by forcing the mind to be quiet, but by learning to observe it with clarity and compassion. Overthinking often becomes stronger when we try to control it. The more we demand silence from the mind, the louder it seems to become. The Buddha understood that control creates resistance, and resistance creates suffering, instead of control. Buddhism emphasizes mindful observation. This means allowing thoughts to arise without chasing them or pushing them away. When a thought appears, we notice it, acknowledge it, and let it pass without judgment. In this gentle observation, the mind begins to relax. It no longer feels threatened or pressured to perform. Peace emerges naturally. When we stop interfering with the mind's movements, observation creates distance between us and our thoughts, and in that distance, freedom is found. We realize that we can experience thoughts without being consumed by them. The mind learns that it does not need to stay alert at all times, that it is safe to rest. This approach is deeply healing because it replaces struggle with understanding. Over time, observation weakens the habit of overthinking. The mind becomes softer, more spacious, and more at ease. Inner peace is revealed, not as something to be achieved, but as something that has always been present beneath the noise of constant thinking.